Hello and welcome to the Middle East Forum Speaker Webinar Series. I'm Stacey Roman and I will be moderating this discussion today. We're pleased to, sorry, I just muted you by accident. We're pleased to have Tarek Fatah, founder of the Muslim Canadian Congress, join us to discuss Islamism in the West, how we got here and how we defeat it. Mr. Fatah will speak for 15 minutes and open it up for questions. Should you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen to type out your question. And with that, I will turn the discussion over to Mr. Tarek Fatah. I believe you're still muted though.
Okay, I'll unmute myself. Well, thank you very much for having me over. It's a privilege to be with the Middle East Forum. Somehow I've always maintained that it is not Middle East, it is almost around the world that we are facing these problems of Islamism or the issue of Islam. And it doesn't necessarily originate today in the Middle East, though it was born over there. And I'm not talking of Islam, I'm talking specifically of Islamism, which, by the way, is the primary threat to Western civilization or generally the West. It's also worth noting that the founders of this ideology of Islamism, which in Arabic, the Muslim Brotherhood refers to al-Islamiyya, its founders were from the West, specifically Sayyid Qutb of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, who during his stay in the United States saw what he considered the evil West that had drifted away from the true paths, as we Muslims say in our prayers, and inserted the word al-Islamiyya instead of just Islam into the objectives of the Muslim Brotherhood. And this has spread primarily not just in Egypt or say Saudi Arabia or Syria, where there has been a great fear of this movement, both from the right and the left, whether it was the early communists of Syria and Iraq or the royal family of Saudi Arabia. All of them had this fear of what this notion of using Islam to install a political ideology. That in a nutshell was what Islamism is and was, and which has its biggest base today, not in Egypt, but in the country that was the first Islamic state ever produced, that is the Islamic State of Pakistan. And as many of us, perhaps many of us do not know, that most Muslims are not Arabs, and the largest Muslim center, its population is the Indian subcontinent, which is India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. All other Arab countries could just be swallowed in that vast, well, 250, 200, about 500 million Muslims who live there, who do not speak Arabic, but who dream of and are sincerely committed to the notion of the day of judgment not coming until all Hindus and Christians would be defeated in what the ideology says is Rome or Hind. And I'd like to touch on that because the people who brought Islamism into the West were not the Muslims who converted to Islam. They were not the Malcolm X's of the world or even his followers or his predecessors. It was this internationalist idea that the West has to be crushed before we can install or implement God's law on earth, which most Muslims, at least the political ones, consider it their destiny, and who live in the United States, they live in the United Kingdom, they live in France, and who sincerely believe that is their mission. And so Islamism, I would suggest to the people listening to it here, is one of the most serious threats that exists for the United States and its allies, primarily in Europe, and to a greater degree to India, and to some degree China. And China has taken one course, which is the total elimination of every aspect of Islamic society in the areas where Muslims are a majority, contrasted that with India, where Muslims virtually have had for the last 70 years a veto, where no law can be brought in if it goes against the political interests of the Muslim minority. Very diverse way of dealing with it. But when the Muslims of Pakistan, primarily in northern India, migrated to the United Kingdom and the United States, and North Africans went to France, Moroccans went to the Netherlands, where, by the way, today there are street fights going on, and it is primarily about the mixing of these two forms of worldview, these contradicting views of the world as to what is our destiny? What do we really want as a people? Most people in the West have sort of limited that to which vacation they're going to take and what's going to happen after the flights are lifted or the bans are lifted. The approach towards leisure and professional sport is so much the opposite of what is in the mind of the American Muslim. I'm talking of those who came from Arab countries and Pakistan, that I don't think the vast majority of Americans even understand why the Muslim Students Association, the MSAs, exist in every university and every urban high school, why they have mosques in every place, who are the people who give lectures over there, what is the role of the hijab, where did it come from? Because in my childhood, and even in my university days, I never heard the word hijab, nor did I ever see it anywhere. But post Cold War, it has mushroomed right across, where you've had a member of the Congress change 200 years of American law simply on the first day of her sitting and wear a headdress. So what I would suggest to you is that 9/11 has somehow been forgotten as the main crisis. If in the United States today you would ask, what is the real problem here? You'd have most people talking about the impeachment proceedings going on in the Senate right now. If you'd say, well, what is the long-term problem? I don't think Islamism would appear in the top 10. Why? Because we have failed to grasp what happened on 9/11. And we still haven't got around the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood exists. The Texas terror funding trial determined as to who was involved, what they were up to, but we forgot because for us, the next football match or the ice hockey match is more important. And Western society is at that level of leisure where it becomes vulnerable to those who have come specifically to damage the spine of what is the post-Reformation, the post-Enlightenment period, the last 400 years of what made North America what it is, what made Canada or the United States into different forms of democracies, and why freedom of press and freedom of speech are so fundamental to our existence, and how that very right is fought by every enlightened Muslim that I have ever met, because they would not allow freedom of speech lest they be challenged and be argued against as to you are a people who are cursing Jews and Christians 72 times a day in your prayers, yet in the interfaith meetings that you have with rabbis and priests, this never comes up because nobody is willing to be labeled a racist. So underneath that, every time we go to a mosque, the 5 times that we go there, we pray towards Mecca and we read that prayer, oh God, put us on the right path. not the path of those who were led astray, or the path of those who you have cursed. And when the question is raised, who are these people? Are we talking of gun runners, child molesters? No. The first are the Christians and the second are the Jews. Now, this is not said and this is not read, but it is in the hadith books that interpret the prayer. So we have an option. I'm giving this just as an example. We have an option in the United States to tell the bearded mullahs who run the affairs in the minds of most Muslims, can you denounce this understanding and say that when we say, do not put us on the wrong path, we mean the path of those who hurt others or who profiteer or those who exploit child pornography or those who cross borders with illegal documents. Say anything. But why don't we ask this question as to who are you referring to? It has never been raised, and whenever it has come up in a discussion, it has come up in a way that is truly gives away the questioner's disdain for Islam, which means end of the debate. But mind you, the Islamist kills Muslims before he reaches out to anyone else. So you got 500,000 Muslims killed in, Syria. The Pakistanis killed 3 million Bangladeshis, all Muslim. Afghanistan, the Muslims have been killing Muslims. And the Muslims throughout the history even beheaded the grandson of Prophet Muhammad and kicked his head around in Damascus, where they formed the latest version of Islam, that is the Umayyad dynasty, that spread and was founded by people who were hostile to Muhammad. None of that is taught, none of that is challenged, none of that viewpoint, which would allow us who oppose Islamism as Muslims to knock the foundation from underneath them. The Muslim Brotherhood today is well entrenched in every university, in every NGO that you could find. And it is now in the hands of the second generation who do not have an accent. It has gone from not the early Muslims of North America, who were primarily of African descent, who came here and grew up during the slave trade. The first Muslims that came here were there. Even after the end of slavery and the civil rights and everything, nobody ever heard an African Muslim say that I want to destroy the United States. Well, perhaps some did, but I'm not talking of Black Panthers or anyone. I'm talking of Malcolm X and his followers. It didn't occur. They wanted a change in society. What we have today from the Islamists of Pakistan and the Middle East, and dare I say, the great ally of the United States, Turkey. One of the most vicious branches of radical Islam that has come out today is Turkey. It's not even Iran, because Iranians, the overseas Iranians who settle in America, are one of the most well-read and educated opponents of Islamism, whereas the Turks have great pride in the new sultan that is coming up. And their view of 600 years of ruling over the lowly Iranian or Arab is suddenly finding glory again in Erdogan. And Erdogan is there because the West wanted him to be there. Remember, he was a NATO ally, just under the belly of the Soviet Union, as was Pakistan, as was Iran at one time. And we are today paying the price that we never, ever tried to instill within these allies of America or the West, which was called CENTO, the NATO of the Asian Alliance, the Central Treaty Organization. It was not done. And today we are, harvesting that hostility that came with it, that the Americans are here to destroy us. Why? This is very significant, because the Jews control America. In every aspect of anti-Americanism, there's a fine sprinkling of anti-Semitism that is poured all over it. And it's done because it is considered legitimate. Our behavior, our hostility, our as in Muslim hostility towards the West and to adherence to Islamism is because of the Jew. The very fundamental hostility to force of anti-Semitism today is Islamism. And we sneak away by it and get away by pointing fingers at the right people by this notion, oh, we are Abrahamic brothers. No, we are not. Every day, in every household, the whole notion of the Yahud and the Hunud as the enemies of Islam are who? The Hindu and the Jew. Well, they're afraid of the Christians because the Christians colonized them. So there is no such hostility there. But the opposite of the Muslim belief of Tawheed, which is one God, is not Judaism or Hinduism, it is Christianity. And it seems that all the agencies that the West has set up, the NGOs, the funding, all the formulas have only enriched those who run them. Because nobody is willing to stand up today and rise up against the freedom given to the beheader of, I forget the name, the gentleman who was beheaded in Karachi, Pakistan. Nothing happened. One would have expected the mosques of the United States of America, or Canada, or Europe to rise up and say, this is not acceptable. The man who murdered that young journalist of the Wall Street Journal has been freed. There is no grounds for someone who slaughters another person on television and spreads the tape around to get around free. And you can go everywhere from Estonia to Poland to France, anywhere where I have gone, including Holland and Great Britain. The fundamental schism that divides society is the imposition of Islamism within Western society. People don't get upset when you have a Muslim neighbor. People get upset when the Muslim neighbor demands that 5 times a day prayer should be read from loudspeakers, which is happening in Toronto. Do you expect someone to be woken up at 5 in the morning because the mosque has installed a loudspeaker and the entire neighborhood has to get up with it? This happens in India all the time. Nobody dares tell the guy, no, the loudspeaker was invented by the kuffar, the people who are outside the faith of Islam. You did not have anything to do with electricity, and Islam's glorious days when they spread all over and conquered all were done without electricity and without megaphones. But who's going to bell the cat? No Western politician risks being called a racist, and no Muslim who genuinely believes that something is being done in their name would like to do so free of cost. Entire careers have been built now by people who are former radicals. You'll notice this. The same radicals who've been caught are now advising the Mounties, the police, the CIA, the FBI. They're sitting there and giving their BS while all of us are just sitting there in wonderment as to what will it take for someone to understand that party A wishes to wipe out all existence of party B, and they have a name for it. They have a promise that Muslims will live forever, but only after they die. That you could date your girlfriend only after you are dead, when you could have dozens of them, except if you are the king or the Nawab or whatever you may call, you could have 200, or the sultans of Turkey, who sometimes had 500. And that's why the sons always fought and there was always bloodshed. But we have to someday wake up and understand that the 9/11, not in our lifetime, but of the 17th century, that was fought on the gates of Vienna, and where the Lithuanians and the Poles defeated the Turks, no one in the Muslim psyche, with the Muslim psyche in political Islam, has forgotten that. It was no coincidence that New York was attacked on 9/11, because 9/11 to us is a completely different date than 9/11 for the Western world or the Judeo-Christian world. Our 9/11 was our defeat in the gates of Vienna, and there's a promise to come back and avenge that defeat. And the Turks, they are the ones who are waiting to do that. And they've done it by aid from the United States of America. Iran, that was an ally of the United States, we sent the Ayatollah on an Air France flight to take over and slaughter tens of thousands of people. Every military dictator in Pakistan is supported by the United States. Every dictator. In Indonesia in 1964, about 1 million communists were killed, wiped out by the Islamists, and thrown, the rest of them were thrown on islands from which they never returned. Thank God Indonesia is a secular, modern country which honors its Hindu ancestry by flying the Garuda airline, by having Krishna on their symbols, by respecting the statues of their ancestors. But you go out of that belt of Eastern Islam, where trade brought in Islam, and you see the whole notion of Muslims slaughtering Muslim in 90% Muslim countries. What makes Pakistani Sunni Muslims kill Pakistani Shia Muslims or drive out from their country Ahmadi Muslims? Or Iran and Turkey have a 500-year war in which, by the way, the West was supporting Iran. When the Turks had the sultans and were attacking Europe, part of the Turkish army was held on the eastern border by Europe supporting the Iranian sultans, but that's another story to tell. The point being that if we cannot single-mindedly agree that Islamism is a threat to Western civilization, and I'm not saying Islam. Islamism is the use of Islam as a political force. People have the right to believe in whatever they wish to. They could be atheists, or they could be Christians, or agnostics, or Zoroastrians, whatever. It's their basic, fundamental, universal human right according to the 1948 UN Declaration of Fundamental Human Rights. But when you mix a religion and use it not just to destroy, but to brainwash your future generations and plant them in every academic circle and say that this land is not your home. This is where God has sent you to destroy it. Who's going to stand up against that? You will need to have Muslims who believe that Western civilization, constitutionalism, what comes from the Greeks, what comes from Reformation and the Enlightenment period is us. When we start owning that, then we will defend it. But as long as the leadership fighting Islamism is non-Muslim, they will be able to say, look, we told you, the kuffar are out there to hurt us. That is why 72 times a day we throw curses at Jews and Christians in the United States of America, in every mosque, in places like India, Europe, anywhere you go. That is the challenge, and that is my suggestion, that this is a fight between Muslims who believe in Western civilization, and it's their fight and their responsibility to expose those who enter the United States or Canada with a single goal: the erosion of Western liberal democracy, the elimination of freedom of speech, and the subjugation of anyone who does not believe in Islam. Thank you very much, and I look forward to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much for that. We will be going until 1:45, if that's all right.
Okay, I'm game.
Wonderful. So we have quite a few questions coming in. The first one is, how can anyone separate Islamism and Islam since they both use the same Quran?
Well, it's not the Quran that is under debate. It is the Sharia law that was written about 100 to 200 years after Prophet Muhammad had died. I maintain, and it's a controversial view, that Islam died the day Prophet Muhammad died. Because this man, for whatever view you may have, created an enormous force from a locust-eating, desert-living place, which nobody even wanted to rule. There was no king, there was nobody over there. He changed that, and in the end, when he asked for a pen and paper, they refused to provide it to him and built a story that Muhammad was illiterate. Therefore, we couldn't give him a pen and paper. But he's the guy who asked for the pen and paper. Then, with 18 hours, his body lay in the May heat of Medina desert, while people fought outside as to who's going to succeed him. And the man who said that black and white are equal, his followers said that the tribe of the Quraysh are superior than the people who are called Ansars, which means it was almost like apartheid. And even till today in Iran, mind you, an Iranian cannot be the supreme leader. He has to be of Arab origin. That is why they wear a black hat. Nobody knows this. So if you're an Iranian, you lost your job. You have to be of Arab origin to become the supreme leader of India. So that apartheid within Islam and racism was built in, and to an extent that in the 14th century, almost when all the caliphates were winding up, a great scholar who's the founder of Wahhabi Islam said it is a sin for a non-Arab to consider himself equal to an Arab. So Islam is something that is based on 5 essential acts of worship. And Islamism is something that keeps them aside and makes Arab supremacy and Islamic supremacy as the ultimate goal, equivalent to what is white supremacy, equivalent to apartheid in South Africa, equivalent to fascist dictatorships anywhere. And that is why the belt of North Africa is so conducive to horrible dictatorships right through the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries.
Great, thank you so much. So if few Muslims politicians are willing to speak out against Islamism, what hope is there for stopping its advance in the West?
It's a very dangerous thing. Some of us do that 24 hours a day, whatever time is available to us. There are some very brave men and women in the United States who I think have backed out because they cannot find support. Because every funding that comes from the US government ends up in the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood front organizations. They've got their grip on every politician. You go to their homes, they've got Democrats and Republican photographs in different rooms. They can fool the American system. And sometimes I feel the simplicity of how we are seen by the host society alarms me.
Understood. So along that line, can you touch on the issues of being seen as politically correct and why this is leading to a dangerous situation?
Well, look at the word Islamophobia. People are not worried about Islam. People are worried about Muslims who would bring in a goat to their condominium and slaughter it in the tub so that the goat is halal, the meat is halal. People are worried about the cultural aspects of living as a Muslim, and where the woman has to walk behind the husband, where a member of the Congress has now wrapped a piece of cloth over her head, not what her culture determines, but what political Islam determines. And we cannot criticize her. The head cloth worn by traditional Somalis or Pakistanis are different. The hijab specifically is a political flag of the Muslim Brotherhood. And it is sitting in the house of the Congress with everybody saying, oh, we're so cute. We look at us. We even have our enemy sitting right with us. So political correctness is allowing us to open the gates of Vienna.
Thank you. And are there any advisors or members of the Biden team that we should be aware of, given your talk?
There are two women from Muslim women from Kashmir who are very well known to be anti-India, which is in the entire developing world, America's only democratic ally. And their job will be to sow differences, spread rumors, and make India sound as if it's a fascist state. Anyone in the United States who today is working to undermine India as a democratic liberal state in the developing world, the only one, is working for the Muslim Brotherhood. Let me be absolutely clear. And they don't have to be from India. They could very well be from Pakistan. I don't think the Arabs or the Iranians even care to know what is beyond the Himalayas. For them, dragons and fires, Goa, and that part of the world starts at the western edge of the Himalayan mountains. That is why Israel also doesn't care if Pakistan has 200 nukes pointed towards it. This is all part of how we view the world. Pakistan's entire nuclear arsenal is pointed towards Europe and Israel. And none of them are concerned because they think of Pakistanis as Uber drivers or corner store operators, people as watchmen somewhere, talking with a strange accent like, what's his name in the Big Bang Theory. So we fit into that criteria and they get away with it.
So are there any Muslim nations that provide equal rights to all religions with full protection to those who practice their religions?
I think to a certain degree, Indonesia and Bangladesh, which has a very rich history of women fighting for the rights of women. In my youth, when in 1970, I was in prison in Pakistan, the equivalent to my organization's party which then East Pakistan was a woman, Motia Chaudhry, and she was known as the tongue of fire, and she still is in the cabinet of the prime minister, who herself is a woman, and they've outlawed religious organizations altogether, and they have finally taken given the death sentence to those who carried out the genocide in 1971. So I think India has a huge potential. It has about 200 million Muslims, but it's having a rough time by the machinations of a very odd country, which is Pakistan, which is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. which has an army that fights, that kills only its civilians. And you'll be surprised, the biggest, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is a Pakistani. Bin Laden was living in Pakistan. All the terrorists live in Pakistan, but the Americans are always blind to Pakistan. You know, a CIA officer was arrested and he got out luckily, but they had to pay someone. That entire country is so corrupt, you could pay a judge. Today, there are riots taking place in Islamabad. Now, mind you, it's a new city that was called Islamabad. 1947, nothing was there. They built a city, called it Islamabad. You can't be more synchronized to political Islam than Pakistan. Its founder should have been tried posthumously for child molestation. He ran away with his friend's daughter who was just 16 and he was 45. He ate pork, he drank whiskey, he had never prayed in his life. They made him the founder of the Islamic State of Pakistan. So you can imagine the dishonesty. I mean, it is everything that is dishonest is apparent to us, but we cover it up in solidarity. Oh, brother, I am your brother, Muslim. Alhamdulillah, mashallah. And they get away with it. More Palestinians have been killed by Muslims than the Jews could, even if they wanted to. This Pakistani general, Ziaul Haq, killed 20,000 Palestinians in Jordan. He became the president of Pakistan, loved by the Americans. So by the way, he died in an air crash with the US ambassador sitting next to him. So it's a drama that you can create. I might even become a playwright and go on with this. Innocent Americans taken to the cleaners. Go ahead, I'm sorry. It's very funny.
Oh, goodness. So are there any Muslim organizations in the West that espouse and promote non-political Islam and not Islamism?
We had in Canada 2 such organizations. There was the Muslim Canadian Congress. Our goal was to make sure there was no racism towards Muslims, but we always maintained that if you have not sworn an oath to the Constitution of Canada, then you're not a Canadian. So get the hell out of here and go back to Somalia or wherever you want to bring Islam. There are 50 countries that are stuck in the medieval era. If you're dying to create that zone over here, let's go. I'll buy one-way tickets for anyone who promises he won't come back. But don't turn this amazingly lovely country like Canada. Honest to God, when our champion won the New York tennis, she said, I'm sorry. It's the essence of decency, Canada. And you come here to destroy it. There were Toronto 18 terrorists that were trained to blow up Canada's structures. They were all caught because the Mounties always get their man, as they say. This time they got their 18 men. But there are very few who are challenging the ethics and morality of dishonesty. There's an entire culture that says, well, they are kuffar, like you are not a Muslim, so you are kafir. The word even went to South Africa in a disparaging way. And they say it is okay if I am dishonest to someone who's not a Muslim. I cheated them. People chat in social gatherings about how they conned someone.
All right, now for the main question. How do you suggest we reform Islamism toward a more peaceful belief system? And is it even possible?
It's not possible. Islamism is a direct challenge to the religion of Islam. And we have to make Muslims understand that. The essence of Islam was a wealth tax of 2%, 2.5% on wealth that every year You cannot think of any other system where equity was such a deep essence of it. The notion that black and white are equal in every respect was noted by Malcolm X when he visited Saudi Arabia, where he was shocked. There are multiple things in Islam which are simply not acceptable because Islam defends slavery. So it sometimes surprises me when so many blacks convert to Islam without asking the gentleman who's converting them that I think you should denounce and say that this aspect of the Quran is not applicable. Because we already have simply accepted, because of Western pressure, to not have concubines. The Quran gives permission to all Muslims to take 1, 2, 3, 4, and what your right hand possesses, which means 4 wives and as many concubines as you please. But you don't know of anyone. Quietly, out of disgrace or shame, Muslims said, we can't do this, or they send us to Utah, but sorry. they want to be in New York and LA. But sorry, my apologies to the good people of Utah. But they are doing this, and there are people who are worried that this is wrong. Most Muslims think this is wrong, but who wants to live with the threat of acid being thrown on your family members, of slurs, or your children having to face this notion? Every school in Canada, urban school in Canada today has a mosque. No Jew or Hindu goes, oh, sorry, sir, I got to pray in the middle of the day. No. They want to get a break, get out, get hold of, maybe if they are not allowed to, take a drag and come back. And you've got this entire cafeterias blocked off for Muslim prayer. One of the leading newspapers of this country in Canada, when you enter the newsroom, there's a mosque there. It doesn't have many Muslims, but the reminder is there. So it was called a prayer room. I went there and put some Hindu statues over there. I said, it should be open to all. There were no Hindus praying in the middle of the day. Nobody prays at noon. You say, oh God, sun's up, I got to pray, man. Somebody has to come up and say, Islam allows us to go home and pray. I'm not kidding you. These are not compulsory prayers. Every Muslim knows that he can go home and pray one at a time, but they want every other person to know, be afraid of me. I'm from the 9/11 tribe. Isn't that so? Why would they be praying in the middle of a hall or in the middle of a shopping mall? With legs stretched out, arms bitten like, tough guys, no mustaches, strange beards. People get scared. And now you say, why do they get scared? Well, look like a nice person and people won't get scared. Give people a smile, say, hello, how are you doing? So it's very simple. Honest to God, it doesn't take a special segment of the US administration to do this. I'll do it for free for them. Honest to God. You tell them. You could have a Middle East Forum special unit to take care of jihadis and Islamists.
All right, and for our last question of the day, our viewer writes, coming from Iran and experiencing what you so eloquently discussed, how can we bring more awareness to the greater community?
You have done, I'll tell you, the Iranian expatriate community has done more than its share of telling the world what they have suffered through. The Iranians have a history of suffering that when I study it, as my ancestry is Punjabi, when I look at what they've gone through and how they've maintained their culture, their civilization, their beautiful poetry, their poets, their architecture, it is a model for the rest of the world to follow, if they have to follow. But Iran somehow ends up being the most hated. Why? Because they're mostly Shia. And so Pakistanis have no problem with Jinnah, who was a Shia, making a Sunni country. It's full of humor. I think if one went on as a Muslim on the, Saturday Night Live or some stage like that, people laugh. They wouldn't hate Muslims. There would be no Islamophobia. There would be simply amazement. How did you guys survive so long under so much oppression? So I'm positive about the future because I'm left of center, and I see development of human society as getting better. And that is why I don't think when people say, oh, the left is getting together, Greta is not from the left. She's sailing on $1 million boats, talking about homosexual turtles, but nobody's talking about unemployed people in Africa, everywhere. Just in the last 1 year, billions went to just a handful of people. One guy at Twitter told the president of America that I'm banning you. Can you imagine that? And nobody said, oh, really? Oh, well, Jack looks handsome. Look at his beard. Oh, he's so rugged. He could kill a tiger with his bare hands. That's the imagery they give. Big, bear, tough billionaire. They made 20 billion in exactly the year where everyone went bankrupt. So those are the issues people come up, and I hope Muslims start integrating. And the first thing is stop keeping Arabic names. Why should Pakistanis have Arab names? I've always asked, you're from India. Why don't you have Indian names? Why Turks can have Turkish names, but why not in America have American names? There are so many Johns around, you could just say, okay, I'm going to be Louis, for example. What would happen if someone's name was mainstream American? You move there for what? You want French names? Go to France. You want German names? Go to Germany. You don't want Arab names, but go to the United States. You go to Arabia and they'll tell you what your social position is. They'll put you under their feet, treat you like slaves, and then you'll say, that's wonderful. I kept my name as an Arab. He graciously welcomed me into his fold. No. I've stayed 10 years in the Middle East. I know how they treat Blacks and Asians and all that. It's just unbelievable. Aren't you glad it's all over?
Yes, well, thank you so much. Unfortunately,
take care. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you for taking time to speak with us today.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. For our viewers, please be on the lookout for our weekly webinar offerings email coming out over the weekend. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks.